So welcome to another Wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we're taking a look at a brand new game from Legion Wargames called Target for Tonight. Now this is a follow-up, a sequel you might call it, to Target for Today, which is a modern reimagining of an old game called B-17 Queen of the Skies. Now that old game was a favorite. It's a solitaire-only game. You have a bomber crew, you're a B-17, you fly over Germany or France or whatever it is at the time of the war you're playing, roll on some charts, fight off some fighters, and it's a great storytelling game. Target for Today was a modern version of that. It was very detailed, it was very well researched, and the story was very good. This is a follow-up to that, and it's called Target for Tonight because it is about the British Bomber Command. So instead of B-17s or B-29s, you're flying Lancasters, Wellingtons, Halifaxes. I think you can fly a Sterling if you were so inclined. Not sure why you'd want to do that. No, I'm just kidding. And it's night raids. So it shares a lot of the same core principles, right, as Target for Today. Indeed, you can actually cross-pollinate these games. You can do, if you have both, you can fly like Lancasters and Wellingtons during the day, and you can fly all the B-17s at night if you wanted to kind of like shake it up. That didn't happen, but like you could do it if you wanted to. So the major differences, though, outside of obviously this being British Bomber Command and the other one being like 8th Air Force and all US planes, is the whole nighttime aspect. And why that's different is the tactical situation is obviously very different. With all the navigation systems and things that you have, I feel like the navigation part of it is very similar, which I was a little bit surprised by. But I guess, technologically speaking, they were decently able to find their ways as much as they were during the day. I didn't feel like it was too much more punishing. However, the combat is the significant difference in this one. Outside of, obviously, again, all the flavor. So combat-wise, Target for Today follows a very similar system to things like, any of the solitaire. B-17s that way, where, the interceptors come in and they'll fly and attack you, and if you don't fend them off, they come round, they get like 3 passes, and then they go off because they run out of fuel or they get distracted. So this is very different, because you're going up against night fighters. So first off, there's far fewer of them. There's just fewer night fighters, right? They're big, usually twin engines, so you're looking at BF-110s, Dorniers, things like that. And first, they have to find you, which doesn't always happen. Then, if they find you, you have to find them, which doesn't always happen. And night fighters do not go away. They won't, like, in the other games, it was kind of predictable. Okay, I've just got to weather this, I got to weather that, and then, like, they're done. Like, they will go away. Whereas, in Target for Tonight, they might lose you. There is an opportunity for that, but there is no fixed combat limit. Like, if they keep finding you, and, like, if they're ace pilots, like, they will not lose you. The combat keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and you have to try and shake them. And in that way, it actually reminds me a lot of Silent Victory or The Hunters, where getting out of that depth charge cycle is very difficult to do. And here, losing your kind of night fighter tail can be very difficult. And as such, it ups the tension and the ante for me. Playing this, I don't know. I don't know if you could tell, I had an amazing time playing this. But it's that tension, it's like, it's pitch black, there's a crescent moon out, you're flying silently under radio silence, and there's a night fighter out there. You might not know he's there, like your crew have no idea until they buzz past you and attack you, and you're like, oh, good gracious. Then you have to try and find the guy, and if you don't find him, he still attacks you. He was like, oh no. But it keeps going, and it is relentless. And you get strafed, you take a bunch of bullets and cannon rounds. You're like, oh good gracious. And you still can't find him, and you take another round of hits, you're like, oh my gosh, we need to find this guy so we can shoot back, or we need to lose him. And it's just, the tension in this one I felt was so palpable, because there's a lot more unknown when you're even fighting someone. Again, there's fewer combats, I felt, and when there is a combat, it's never 3 guys attacking you at once. It's one guy, and they will only attack one at a time. But later on in the war, they try to use their Schrager music, which is their, I think they're like 45mm cannons, like placed at a 45-degree angle on top of the night fighters. They just try and buzzsaw your wings off with cannons, and you're like, good gracious. And, same with Target for Today, Target for Tonight has so much detail in it. When you take hits, you resolve where your plane gets hit. And that's where most games end. Well, this one, where you get hit, how much damage does it do to that thing? What specific system gets blown up? And it means rolling on a few more charts, but if you're invested into this and invested into your crew, those few extra charts make the story so much more vivid and explicit. And that's the one thing I really, really love about this game, and Target for Today as well, is the narrative is so much more explicit. And some of it, I'll be honest, pretty grim, but some of it's really just cool. Like, instead of you just shooting down a night fighter, there's an optional table or 2 you can roll on to see how much damage you do to them and how they blow up. Do they blow up in midair? Does their wing fall off and fold off as they're falling out the sky burning? Do they just break off and bits and pieces fall? Just, it's total flavor, but it makes it just that extra bit tasty and rich. And that's what I really like about this system. Your chart book is big. Like all these games, effectively, you could just boil it down to, I'm just rolling on some charts. Sure, you could say that, but for me, I name all my crew members, you get invested in it, and it's almost kind of like a role-playing game in a way. And that's something that I enjoy doing. But this game, I'm biased because I'm English, and it's Bomber Command, so it speaks to me that much more than Target for Today does. Target for Today is great, and if you like it, either of these games are really good, but this one is it's the British version. Of course I'm gonna like it a little bit more. Just is what it is. So take that with a pinch of salt. I am a little bit biased on that. But, naming all your guys, I'm like, just get into it, roll on the charts, have some fun with it. And, you get rolls where you're like, it's a stand-up moment. I remember my first ever flight in a Lancaster. I thought I was doing so great. Didn't take that much damage, fended off a bunch of night fighters, got to the target, which was Cologne at the time, so it was a freaking cakewalk because it was such a short mission anyway. But the flak over Cologne was so heavy, we got hit by the flak, shrapnel, goes right through the hull, and it blew up and damaged the bomb bay doors. So at first I was freaking out that my bombs were going to explode and everyone was going to die. But it didn't. But it jammed the bomb bay doors so I couldn't drop my bombs. So I'm like, great. The mission was a failure. I couldn't even drop my bombs. So then I had to fly all the way home, fighting off night fighters left, right and center. And I thought I had done so great. And I got to the very last space before England. And I could not shake this one night fighter. And he shot me up so good right at the end. I lost my tail gunner. He died. It was tragic. And and I got shot up so badly that like I remember rolling that to land roll, and I was like, I rolled it and landed, and I was like, oh, I have to breathe. I was holding my breath, and I had to tell myself to remember to breathe. It was that, and I had to pace up and down in here because I was like, whoa, I did it! Like I was excited. I had some adrenaline, which is insane. A game shouldn't do that, but this game did because of how much I put into it. And that, that roll was so intense, partly because I'd been shot, but I still have my bombs on board. So if you you have a huge negative to that roll, because if you have a bumpy landing and all your bombs blow up your plane and blow up half the airstrip, that's goodbye for you. And so, even for my very first flight, I was like, yep, I'm in, I'm sold, this game, I'm hooked. It's so good, because it actually gave me, feelings. And that's so cool. I recognize that this kind of game isn't for everyone, because it's just a narrative style. Some people want to have more tactical and lots of control, and that's what they want in a solo. Totally get it. I like that too. But I love a place for good. This is a mechanism for storytelling, as well as putting yourself into the shoes of, and honoring the memories of everyone in Bomber Command who had basically a fairly terrible time of it during the war. The loss rates and the casualty rates of Bomber Command was staggering, but you get to fly it, you get to do all of those things, you get to fend off those night fighters and do it all kind of, in the stealth of night. It's a neat way of doing the game. I enjoyed it. And the one thing I really, really liked, and the first time it happened, I was like, this is kind of weird, is the way you roll on the charts for when, the enemies come. You roll how many enemies there are, and then you roll to see if they find you, and then you roll to see what they are. And at first I was like, oh, just kind of, normally I would you roll, oh, I've got this many enemies, and they're, BF-110s, great. In this one, you don't roll what they are until they find you. Which I was like, oh, that's so cool. If they don't find you, you kind of imagine as they buzz past you, I don't know what that was, but it was terrifying. That was a night fighter. We could not be more lucky. And everyone kind of pats themselves on the back and I don't know. Just the story from this, I had a blast with it, and will continue to do so. What I'll do is I'll show you kind of just very briefly how the game works, and then wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a look at the board. I guess board's kind of a stretch. This is actually a mounted board, and this is just to play kind of a card for the Lancaster. If you're playing with a Wellington or Halifax, just switch out, put the other one there. So this is kind of your tactical board. If and when you get attacked, they'll come in from different approaches. This is 12 o'clock, 1:33, 6 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, or 10:30. And then there's a vertical dive and a vertical climb. And then if it's a vertical climb, there's a Schrager music option in the latter part of the war. So this will be very familiar if you've ever played any of these style games. And you have your little target zones here, so depending on where you go, you'll go X amount of zones, and you've got to fly back as well. And then you're going to go through your kind of procedural aspect of that through the whole thing. You can play a squadron game, where you fly a whole squadron. It's very time consuming, but that's an option you can do as well. And then with the course of the war being as long as it is, and the modifications that were made, there's a lot of different upgrades for different electronic warfare upgrades and changes and things that will come. And then you'll mark the ones that the Luftwaffe has as well. So you'll be making advances, but they'll be making advances, and those come and go as one side gets the upper hand, etc., etc. And then up here you've got armament options as well. You can at some point start switching out 303 Brownings or for 50 cals. You can do a lot of different bits and pieces as you upgun your plane, or, you know, there's choices to be made, at least a little bit, throughout the course of the campaign as far as your configuration. You'll always have only 7 crew members, so it's not, you know, I think the B-17s are like something crazy, like 9 or 10. You have a lot more, I felt. You also had a lot more guns. In this one, you really only have 4 at best. So you'll be... I felt more vulnerable, but the nighttime can be your ally. And I say can, and that's because this game is very important in the sense that it has the phases of the moon in the Gazetteer. And so the phases of the moon will dictate, you know, if it's a full moon, it's called a bomber's moon. Well, nice and easy for you to see the target. The problem with that is it's also nice and easy for the anti-air to find you. So it's a double-edged sword. But basically what you do is you create yourself... this is a photocopy of a card in the game. You photocopy this... You fill out your crew roster. I always track the ammunition. To me, I don't know. I just enjoy doing that. They say it's optional, but you know, it gives you something to think about instead of just spraying and praying all the time. You know, there's real consequences to doing certain things, and you know, it's which campaign, which mission, all that kind of stuff on here, and then you're going to work through all the different zones. That's and the zones will have different denotations. You know, you'll leave England, which is kind of zone 1, and you might fly over to zone 7. And it's just kind of an abstraction of distancing. Each one of these is like 50 odd miles or so. And so you'll start in zone 1 in your little plane, you'll move to zone 2, and you'll start rolling for your encounters. Zone 3, do all the way there and all the way back again. And the Gazetteer will tell you that zone 2 and 3 are water, zone 4 is like, you know, Norway, zone 5 is, you know, Germany. You start getting into like Hamburg as you kind of flying from East Anglia over, and then you can go all the way really far deep into Germany. You'd fly over France first, and that stuff's important because it denotes what kind of resistance you may or may not find. If you get downed, you know, if you get downed in occupied France, well, the Gestapo's going to get you. Unless, of course, it's 1945 and you get downed in France. Not that bad, right? You're not going to get taken POW. So, this stuff's pretty neat, and the Gazetteer does all that for you. But really, sequence of play-wise, you've got your guys in your plane, and you basically are rolling for things like navigation, are you on or off target, and all of that is contained on this pretty good bifold play aid here. So you've got yourself sequence of play in the zones, so you determine your bomber's altitude. When you move into a new zone, you get to choose. Am I going to be at high, low, or on the deck? And most of the time, you're going to want to be on high. Sometimes that choice might be taken away from you. If your oxygen is out, you can't fly at 15,000 feet, because you'll also suffocating die. So you'll have to be at lower altitudes, which means I think it's easier to bomb because you're closer, you can see the target easier, but it's much, much easier to get hit by flak, and it's much easier for the searchlights to find you, things like that. And then you basically are going to consult this games table book, and you just roll through the different charts in here. And so it starts with things like you roll the weather in the zone, and it'll tell you. So the weather in the zone, you just roll 1d10. So you just roll your d10, and we rolled a 1, which is really good. 1 to 2 means it's clear conditions, and there's some modifiers based on the previous weather. If you had good weather before, it's more likely you'll keep your good weather. If you had bad weather before, it's more likely you'll keep your bad weather, for example. So you roll there, and you just go down your sequence of play here. So you roll weather, you roll to see if your mission was recalled. So if you haven't gotten to the target yet, you roll to see if you're recalled. It's very unlikely, and so you say black die is the first number. So we rolled an 8. I say it's unlikely. A 1 to a 6, we'd be immediately aborted, and we rolled an 8. So, you know, it can happen, but most of the time it won't. And then you're going to roll to see if you get any random electronic malfunctions. We're flying a Lancaster, so on a 1 through 4, we'll have a system failure. And it's on a 100. We rolled 56, so no, we don't have a system failure. But if you did, right, you then roll on this chart to see what kind of system failure you have. And then it'll tell you, hey, these are the details of, this is all the bad stuff that happens to you and what can happen to you if you have system failures. So it's pretty cool in that way. And then you check for contrails. Well, we had clear weather, so I believe we don't have to roll on this. No, we do, yeah, we always roll. Roll this. If you're at high altitude. Okay. If you're at lower altitudes, you don't have to roll this. So we're going to roll a d10, and we roll a 5, which means we have 4 through 10 means no contrails. So that's good. Means we don't have big, contrails following after us, making it really easy to spot us. And then you roll for detection. So you roll their radar system, and it's 2d6. See if we get found out. And we rolled a 5. So on a 5 or less, we are not detected. And there's some modifiers. +1 if your bomber takes off in the last 1/3 of the bomber stream. So you roll that before at the beginning of your campaign. So if you're the last ones in the bomber stream, it's easier for them to detect you because so many bombers have come before them and they're looking harder basically. So if you're not detected, it's great. You basically just move on to the next zone. You're going to roll to see if you're on target still, like if you're navigating well. You're going to roll to see if there's any collisions, if you're a good pilot basically. Colliding with your fellow Lancasters it can happen during the night. You have to have some pretty bad rolls for that to happen. It's 2d6 and on 11 you might crash, I think. And then you roll a d6, and then on only a 6 you do. So it's difficult to actually collide when it's just your regular bomb stream. But if you do get detected, let's say we were detected on this chart, then you basically go over to see if the searchlights find you. So the radar's picked you up. What you're going to roll is for searchlight and anti-aircraft. So it's 2d6, and you roll a 6. So at 6 currently, we're doing alright. Bomber is not detected. But you just look down the modifiers. -2 if ground fog, no. -1 if cloud covered, no. -1 if your bomber takes off in the first third, because you're able to skip ahead. They don't detect you. If you're at the back end of the bomb stream, you'll face a lot more combat. -1 if you have electronic window dropping or mandrel. We don't have mandrel, we don't have window, because that's later war, for example. +1 if clear conditions. So this 6, 5, 6 becomes a 7. That's not great. +1 if cloud cover, obviously. It's a +1 from contrails. Luckily we didn't have any contrails. And +1 if you took off in the last third of the bomb stream, no. +1 if your bomber had a fire burning from its last combat. If you've got fire on board, they're going to see you flying in the sky. And then you basically consult which moon phase you're in. If you're in a crescent moon, it's harder for them to find you. If you're in a full moon, easier for them to find you. And let's say they find you, they put a searchlight on you. You have this big old searchlight counter that you stick on the board. And then you, so if you spend more time in each zone, which can happen, you're going to roll continuing. See if they continue that. But then you roll AAA, you roll anti-aircraft fire, and anti-aircraft fire can be pretty brutal. So you roll 1d6 to see what kind of fire there is. And let's say we get a 3. So a 3 gives us light AA fire, which may or may not be modified. And so we're going to consult the light AA chart here and roll 2d6. Oh, yikes. 5, 6, 7, 8. So 5 through 9 is a miss. So there's light AA fire, but it misses. And you can see it's going to miss a lot in light AA fire. When you start getting into the medium and the heavy AA or AAA, this is when things get real bad for you. And the AAA fire gets much, much worse as you go over the targets. If you're illuminated by a searchlight, which we were, if you're over the target +1/+1, so you can get yourself into these hits real quickly. Let's say you get hit. If you rolled a hit here, what you do is you consult this table, and you're going to roll how many hits the AA does to you, basically. So you roll 2d6, and this is a 6, 7, 8, 9. So 6 through 9 is only 1 hit, so that's good. If you start rolling extremes, you're going to take 2, 3 hits. If you have a burst in plane, BIP, you're pretty much can just write yourself off. You're probably all going to die if it explodes in your plane. So we're going to roll 1 hit, and you look over here, you roll on this table for each hit scored. So if we'd taken 3 hits, we'd roll on this chart 3 times. But we're only going to roll once, so you roll 2d6, and we rolled a 9, and the 9 means we're going to get hit in the tail. So this is where you're then going to fish out your Lancaster manual, and the Lancaster manual has all of your damage in it. So that's this handy dandy guide, and it tells you here we're gonna roll. We roll tail, right? Tail, and it's table L-5. It's that's a little bit confusing. So table L5 is in this little kind of owner's manual. I love it. So we're gonna roll in the tail section where we get hit. So we're going to roll 2d6, and we rolled a 5. So we're going to get hit in the tail turret. So we're going to roll 1d6. On a 1 through 2, our guns become inoperable. On a 3 through 5, our tail gunner rolls for a wound. And on a 6, our guns are inoperable, and the tail gunner rolls for a wound. So we're going to roll 1d6, and we roll a 2. So that means our guns are inop. That's very bad. Because you'll be using your tail guns a lot in this one. So, great. Our tail guns got shot up by AA fire. Not ideal. Then, you're going to go back here. That's just AAA fire. So then we're going to see if the night fighters find us. This is the number of night fighters tracking us in the zone. So we're going to roll 1d10. And we rolled a 3. And on a 3 through 7, which could be modified, we're going to have 1 night fighter. And we're going to see if the night fighter actually finds us. And this is something that I thought was very interesting, because you roll, there's someone after you, and then you roll to see if they find you. And I thought it was interesting that they did it this way round, rather than rolling, do they find you, and then you wouldn't even bother with this. I thought it was interesting because now you can say, oh, there's a guy after us, and then we're going to roll our 2d6, and we roll a 5, so he's pretty much not going to find us. But I like to picture that, man, there's some plane out there just buzzing past us, and he didn't find us, and it adds to that tension of like, oh, that was such a near miss, because we knew there was one there, but we couldn't find it or see it, and it couldn't see us. I just think that's a really neat way of doing it. So in this instance, the night fighters don't find us, they zip on past, and then we kind of move on. Well, let's say they had found us. If you roll nice and high, they find you. And again, a bunch of modifiers here for you, and everything's listed with its modifiers, and I really, really like that. You don't have to flip around in rules, everything's where it is and where it should be. So then you're going to roll on here, depending on what year and what campaign you're playing. So let's say we're rolling on this one, we rolled a 5. 5 tells us we get a Dornier 217J1. And you basically have this big old stack of Dorniers and Junkers 88s and 110s. So let's pick out our little Dornier. This is what's going to kind of find us. Okay. And there's some options here for different radar systems, or if they're going to do a Schrager music attack. All this stuff might come into play. This is kind of based on the timeline, some optional bits and pieces here. What you will do is you will roll every time on this chart, and this might be optional, but I would always recommend it. Always roll on this chart for this quality of the pilot. So it's 1942, and we rolled a 9, which means we got a Flieger. That's a shame. Flieger is very much just like a normal pilot. If you start getting into these Experte and the veterans and the novices are pretty bad. It's pretty easy to lose them, and they don't attack very well. But man, if you get the Expertes, the aces, whew, you just kind of say your prayers and hang on to your seats, basically. Then you're going to roll 2d6 to see where and how you're attacked. So we're going to roll a 7, which means we're going to attack from 6 o'clock. So you stick him in... Ooh, we're knocking all these guys over. So we're going to get attacked from 6 o'clock, and then we're going to roll one more d6 down here, and that's going to tell us the position. So we rolled a 3, and a 3 means level. So 6 o'clock level, this is where this guy is coming in to get us. Now, this is really bad for us, because the only guy that can shoot him at 6 o'clock level is our tail gunner. But if you remember, our tail gunner is in op from that AA fire we took. So this will probably, this is where you start getting very tense, and you're like, oh, good gracious, we're just trying to weather this storm. And you can look here, you've got these fields of fire. So the nose gun can attack 10, 30, 12, and 130, all at low level and high. Our tail gun, all the way down here, can attack 6 o'clock, low level and high. The only other person that can attack 6 o'clock is the mid-upper turret, which can attack high, and then the ventral turret can attack 6 o'clock, but only low. And this level is just perfect. Right? It's the angles of fire. Our tail gunner could attack, but they're in op, so we're basically just going to have to suck it up. And we're going to get raked with fire here, probably. So then you just flip over. Now, you've done all that, right? You know this guy is going to come and attack you for the game purposes. But really, we're looking on this table to see, do we know he's there? Like, can I even shoot back? And this is just a really cool table. So I'm going to roll 2d6. And we roll a 9, which is pretty damn good. Because Night Fighter is detected. You want to roll high on this one. We're going to detect in basically every phase of the moon. With or without, with modifiers, depending. But if you roll low and you don't see them, you don't get to shoot back at all. You're at the mercy of their cannons. Now, we don't get to do that anyway because our tail gun's out, but, we see them. That's at least something. There is random events. There's a random events table which can crop up from time to time. But then basically what we're going to do is we're going to roll their attacks, because there's bomb or defensive fire, but we don't have any of that, so we're not really all that worried about it, so we can't do anything to them. So then they are going to attack us. That's fighter damage. Okay, German offensive fire. Yeah, if you don't spot them, they shoot you first, and it is not fun. So German offensive fire is right here. So we're going to roll 2d6. Remember, we're at this 6 o'clock level position, so we're going to roll kind of on this chart here. And we rolled a 4. And a 6 or less is a miss. And again, there's some modifiers here. If he was an expert, he'd be +2. All this kind of stuff. He's a Flieger, so he doesn't get any modifiers. So that's a miss. Very, very lucky for us. If he'd rolled hits, we do hit resolution. And what you consult is, and it's not just, oh, we get hit. So you look here, we look at 2d6, we're being attacked at the 6 o'clock position. We roll 2d6, we roll 5, 6, 7, 8, and an 8 means we get 2 hits. And then you roll on a modifier table, because you might get more and more and more damage. So we're going to roll 1d6 on this one, and we rolled a 6. So we're going to currently take 2 damage, but it's times 2, so we're going to take 4 hits from the cannon spray from them. So some of these planes, you know, the Yonkers 88C6, mostly it's times 1s, which aren't going to do anything. Some of it's times 0s, which means it's kind of superficial, nothing-y damage, and just some 1s and 2. Some of them are absolutely brutal, though. You'll get 1 plus 2 hits, 1 times 1 hits. This is Yonkers 88C6, 50% chance it's doing double hits to you. The optional ME262, you know, really, 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 really bad. But that's kind of how this one works. The fighter damage is much, much worse than the AA. Unless with the AA you get the bursting plane, then you're all toast, basically. But you know, you roll damage, and then you're going to roll on all these tables in here again to see all the damage that you take. And then what you're going to do, after that round of combat, you're going to roll 1d10 to see if they lose you. And on a 5 or less, they lose you. But there are a lot of modifiers here. And 5 or less, I mean, it's a 50-50, but with modifiers, it's usually more than that. It can be really, really hard to shake these guys. If your pilot's an ace, they're +2, which basically means you're looking at a 30% chance you might get away, at best. And that's in, like, ideal conditions. So it's really, really neat. You know, getting away is very difficult, because what happens is, you know, if we don't lose contact, we're going to roll again all of that stuff. So we're going to roll a new attack position for them. We're going to then roll to see if they actually see us again. We're going to roll to see if we see them. We're going to do all of that again. And you just keep going and keep going until either you die or they lose contact with you. And it is just... It goes on and on and on, and it's very, very tense. And there'll be a lot of times where you don't have contact. Okay? It's you know, which it's kind of the silence of the night, and you get through it. But when the contact happens, it is dark, it is furious, and it is terrifying. Because you have control over your guns, but boy, finding the enemy in the first place is the real challenge in this one. And once you do all that, then you get to the zone where you have to be there and you have to turn around and come back. And in the zone, there's a bunch of positive modifiers, so it's easy for them to be lots of night fighters, lots of AA. You're going to roll through all that twice, kind of in the bombing run and then afterwards. Then you have to do your bombing run, which you're just going to drop a bunch of bombs and roll on a chart to see what you hit and what you don't hit. And then you got to get yourself home as well in one piece. And so, you know, it tells a wonderful story the more you personally invest into it. And I wanted to... The detail, though, of all these charts in this table is, you know, oh, I could just be like, oh, I got hit in the wing. Yeah, but what happens when you get shot in the wing? The wing's pretty big. So you look at your wing, do you get hit in the fuel tanks, or the engines, or the wing root, or the landing gear? If your landing gear gets shot out, have fun landing back in Norwich. Have fun, truly. You know, when you start taking wounds, things get really, really fairly graphic. It's pretty intense. That was the one thing that I was like, oh dang. I think the crew wounds are in here somewhere. I lost my tail gunner, and it goes through really specifically, if you want to, like, what happens. And, you know, it knows it was the tail gunner, and it's like, how serious was the wound, and then you roll, like, what happens, like, where in the body they get hit, and then you roll what happens to them. Like, some of it's pretty grim, if I'm honest, but it's very vivid, and it helps you with your narrative. But even when you shoot down enemy planes, there's this super fun chart down here. It's just total flavor. It's totally optional. There's no game function whatsoever, other than to paint that picture even stronger. You know, You shoot down the plane, great. Most of us would be like, sweet, chalk one up, that guy's one step closer to being an ace. But they give you this chart, you roll 2d6 to see what did you do? You roll a 4, fuel tank, boom. Ruptured fuel tank catches fire, plane explodes, pilot killed. You imagine you're raking fire with your .303 caliber, tracers going through the air and big fireball. And you're like, it's just that extra level of flavor you get in this game that I really, really like, that helps bring it to life. I very much enjoy it. It is rolling through charts. Some of the missions are very long, comparatively at least. Some of them aren't. Some of them are fairly short. You only go 5 zones kind of thing. But it's a very, very enjoyable game. But that's mostly speaking how it works. Your guys might get wounded. They might get aces. If you have a fire on board, you've got extinguishers you might need to put out, things like that. But generally speaking, you'll be rolling through those charts. You'll become very familiar with them. There comes a point where, for some of the simpler charts like navigation and contrails, you kind of have it memorized, so you can just roll the dice and move on. But all in all, as you work through it, you get a wonderful story that has a lot of depth and flavor with the books and charts as well. So, and what we'll do is we'll wrap up here with a few final thoughts. That was a look at the game, at least a little bit of it. The games do take a little bit of time. The flights can take, I guess, some of the long ones, they can go on for a bit, especially if you have a lot of combats. It can take a good chunk of time to do just one mission. Some of them can be really quick once you get the hang of it, but this one there is a lot of charts, so you kind of roll, kind of go through things. But some, if you're flying all the way down to Dresden or Munich, there's a lot of zones to go through. You'll do a lot of bombing. The one thing that I do think is very cool, and I mentioned it kind of before, is you can kind of cross-pollinate with Target for Today. And I looked at the Gazetteer in Target for Today, and it has all the same. So, Bomber Command bombed fewer targets, so the Gazetteer is much thinner than the one for Target for Today, because they also have Italy and all that kind of stuff. The 15th Air Force, 8th Air Force, all that kind of stuff. There's just more targets. So that was much thicker, but all the targets in that are in Target for Tonight, and they're all identical, the ones that are based out of England. So you can really easily just move back and forth between those two. No big deal. There's a few extra rules that they include in Target for Today of like, hey, if you're using this, you can do that. You can even get, Legion does B-29 Super Fortress. You can even fly B-29s in Europe. It's like a what if you wanted to. You can do that. But the production value of this one is off the chain as well. It's much, their games have gotten progressively nicer, which I have appreciated. The rulebook itself is semi-gloss. It's color. It's really well done, nice and thick. The counters and the artwork's gorgeous. That's very similar to Target for Today. But they had these big, this size manuals with all the B-17 stuff in it. They condensed them into these historical looking pilot manuals and kept them smaller. These are so great. It's little bits like this. The attention to detail really comes out in this one. And I like that a lot. I feel like the game tables is organized. It might be organized the same, but it's nice and glossy. I don't feel like I'm going to wear it out as much. But I also feel like it's organized very well. I don't know if I had a problem with Target for Today. It's probably fairly similar. But I know I played this with great ease. It was very easy to go through the charts on this one. You read the rules once, play through the charts, and you've got the rules. It's not a difficult game to learn. So, all in all, I had a great time with this. I will be playing a heck of a lot more of it than this. I don't know if I would ever kind of mix the two. I think I would probably keep them separate, only because I just don't know why I would do that. The individual flavors of these games are so rich that keeping them as their own entities, I think, is a really nice way to do it. But this is available from Legion Wargames if you are any kind of interested, I highly recommend it. You will need, one thing I will say, some solo games come with like the pads that you fill out. This doesn't. It comes with like 5 or 6 really like thick cards. You have to make photocopies. All the stuff I think is also you can just download it and just print it off yourself. At least like of the fillables, you can do that as well. And at some point, as this grows older, people on BGG will make nice historical ones. They've already done that for Target for Today. So there's a lot of resources both out there and that are coming as well from the fan community, which I appreciate a lot as well. But you'll need to make some photocopies of like the worksheets that have like, this is my bomber and this is how much ammo I've got, all that kind of stuff. You've got to do that. But all in all, I had a fantastic time with this so far. I will have more fantastic times with this as I go through and play more and more and more of it. This one will be a mainstay for me. It's early for sure, and I haven't played a lot, but this might be a contender for my favourite game of the year so far. It's that good. Again, because the theme is tailored for me. It's perfect for me. I love it, and the tension in it is so good, which that's one of my favourite parts of other solitaire games, but it's also Air War. I mean, it's an amalgam and fantastic components. It's like the perfect recipe for me, personally. I had just such a good time with it that I'll recommend it to anyone to pick this up. Legion Wargames Target for Tonight. It is out now. Go and get it and play it. If you don't want to play Bomber Command, if you're a red-blooded American and you want to play 8th Air Force, Target for Today is also very, very good. It's very similar in style to this. Just the situation's different, you fight differently, and you frankly got a heck of a lot more machine guns to shoot. Your bomber crew is very small in this game. It's like, ooh! But this one's fantastic. I love it very, very much. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.